Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Black Scientists Cooperative podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing the role of Black scientists in the fight against COVID 19 and the importance of Black folks having a seat at the scientific table. Tonight, we are representing our alma mater, Meharry Medical College. Shout out with our Meharry made t shirts on. Woo woo. And we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Swinburne Augustine, aka Jason. So you'll hear us referring to him as Jason tonight because, again, this is just a chat in the living room with a couple of Black scientists wanting to make data simple for you. So we're going to kick it off with Dr. Shantae Williams. Can you begin our discussion tonight?
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Jason, for joining us tonight. It is so good to see you. So, our first question, how can we be sure the vaccine is safe? What step does the government take to ensure that clinical trials and vaccines are safe for people?
Hmm.
Hey gang, nice to see you again after so long since graduation, right?
Right.
That's been a long time, but it's nice to see all of you doing great. How can we be sure that the vaccine is safe? And what does the government do? Well, first of all, before we can do any sort of human subject research, we must, because of what has happened before with the Tuskegee experiments on Black folks and with the Nazis doing experiments on folks with the Nuremberg trials, they came up with the Belmont report and here and with other reports. So anytime you have to do human subjects research, you must be trained and you must follow those guidelines strictly. One of them is to do no harm. And whatever you do must benefit the people that you're doing the research on. So that is by law, and you cannot cross it. Our research proposals go through an institutional review board, an IRB, which is made up of a bunch of not just scientists, but people in the community, pastors, teachers, and other members of the community who look at the proposal, ethics officers, they look and see if that research is valid, if it will benefit the population or those people that are being asked to consent to do that research. So there are a number of ways that there's stops and ways that you can ensure that the research is valid and that it can proceed. So that is how that the same things with the clinical trials, exactly the same things apply. The Health and Human Services, HHS, they are responsible for ensuring that those things are done, and FDA before it's approved. They all have to go through, whether it's here or out of the country. Each country has their own sets of rules, but when those things have to come here, they must abide by what we do here as well.
I think that it's critical for us to also give our audience some context that Jason, you've actually been a scientist for over 20 years, but you've also worked in the government capacity for a number of years as well. So you are well familiar with how these processes are happening and, are able to advocate for our communities as such. Would you say?
Yeah, so I've been working developing rapid saliva assays, looking for antibodies in saliva to determine human exposure to a bunch of environmental pathogens. For example, the last paper I just published is in the Journal of Clinical Microbiology, a rapid saliva test for hepatitis A virus. As a screening tool, I've done it for noroviruses and Toxoplasma gondii Campylobacter, and a bunch of others. So we look at human subjects. We collect saliva samples from them. So we must go through the IRB process. And if we have to change anything, if anything changes during that research, we have to stop immediately and go back to the board and have them approve whatever it was. And if any participant decide, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, they are stopped immediately. No questions asked. That is the law.
And
So
you know what?
that is what we've been doing.
And you know what, Jason, to your point about the IRB, that's a continuous process throughout the whole clinical trial. It's a continuing review. So even if it's a year into it, even if it's 2 years into it, you still have to ask these questions to make sure that you are aligned and under proper regulation with working with humans.
Yes, and every you have to address everything that may go wrong. You have to anticipate in the IRB application, your proposal, you must address everything that may go wrong and how you would address it. Anything that may cause harm to that patient or that subject, you have to address it and ensure that you have a proper response for how you will take care of it. Otherwise, you won't get approved and you won't get funding. You will not do that research, period.
And Jason, just for clarity, can you explain to our viewers what IRB is, or who that body represents?
Yes, the IRB is an institutional review board. So let's take Meharry, for example, or any other research institution, be it a hospital or university, medical school, anybody endeavoring to do human subjects research. The institutional review board is put together by that school, and it is required by law by any organization that is receiving federal government funding must have an institutional review board, and they're made up of members of the community, not scientists, because they're going to be biased and they understand the language. So you will have ethicists, bioethicists, you have psychologists in the community, preachers, pastors in the community, church members, teachers, so grandmothers, all people, they advertise and they can come in and sit in on the meetings. And at every point in the research, you have milestones, you have to report back to them. What is your progress to that level? And is it satisfactory? Do you need more time or whatever else? You must keep them informed at certain milestones in the research. And this is very, very serious. You cannot deviate from that.
So I kind of want to piggyback off of something you said, and that is in regard to community members that make up this institutional review board. And you may or may not know, but is there any compensation involved? Are there incentives for serving on this board? And if so, what do they look like, and how could that possibly skew their view on certain applications for certain subjects to be studied?
And no, it's all voluntary. It is voluntary, and those are people in the community who, like, let's say I wanted to do the NIH and the HHS, Health and Human Services, have in the Belmont report, there are a bunch of people, and by law, they're people that are protected individuals. Let's say the Native Indian tribes, Black people, people who are imprisoned, and people in the military, because a commander can say, I want you to go give blood, I want you to go do this. And then you're thinking it's not voluntary anymore because my boss is telling me to go do this. So those people are not paid. They understand the research and they see the benefits, how it will benefit society or that particular group, and then they will approve it. they're not paid.
So it sounds like, to kind of bring it all together, research is really a community effort, but a lot of the time, you don't see the community involvement. You only see the researcher involvement or the government involvement, but you don't see that community input that happens in these trials. And I think that's very important to point out, because when we are thinking about these trials, there are people in the room that are representing the general public. And I think that's important to reiterate that and to emphasize that, especially in the face of how quickly this vaccine was developed, right? So a lot of people are concerned about how quickly the vaccine was developed. A lot of people are concerned about the fact that they keep hearing this phrase that this is new technology that we're using to develop this vaccine. And that has really, sort of made people apprehensive about taking the vaccine, getting the vaccine, in addition to all the other factors that we talked about earlier. So, how do we know that the science behind the vaccine is accurate? How has that data been verified? How do we trust the science?
So the quickness of this vaccine, it's only quick because we're only paying attention now. But remember, this is a coronavirus, right? The bird flu, the MERS flu, all these flus that we had before a lot of them were coronaviruses in the Middle East, in Hong Kong, and all those. They were. So we've been working on these coronaviruses for a while, then this one shows up. And because we'd never been exposed to it, and a lot of mismanagement and misinformation, we ended up with a horrible pandemic that is devastating lives economically, physically, in all kinds of ways, right? We all sitting at home. So they've been working on those vaccines for a while. Now, the old way of doing the vaccine was just like the flu vaccine is like you hit kill or chemically inactivate the virus, and then you package it and inject it in, and then the body will take it up, break it up in pieces, and make antibodies against those pieces. Now they realized, okay, so the coronavirus, this SARS-CoV-2, is a single-stranded RNA virus. That single strand is the instructions for, so let's say, I put it in a simple way, it's a piece of thread, and that one string has a piece of blue, a piece of red, a piece of yellow, a piece of black. The piece of white is a bunch of string of letters. When it's red, will make the proteins for the spike protein. The spike protein is what we look at. You see this spike on top of the virus all over it. That spike protein is very immunogenic, and it must bind to our cell. It binds to the receptors on our cells, the ACE2 receptors. And when it binds, then the cell opens up and lets it in. It's like a key. That's the spike protein. So if we just took the sequence for the spike protein alone, and the way I can look at it is, people think that the nanoparticle that spike that the RNA is put in is metal or some kind of thing. It's like looking into a miniature cod liver oil tablet. See that clear cod liver oil coating? It's just a protein coat, and then you have the sequence in there for the spike protein only. The spike protein by itself is not infectious. It cannot infect you. No way. It can only help the virus itself bind to our receptors so it can get in. It's not infectious on its own. So that's what they just took that sequence put it in to a lipid nanoparticle, inject it, and when it gets in, the body starts making a whole bunch of spike proteins. So the immune system picks that up and makes a whole bunch of antibodies against it. So the first time you're injected with it, it's like alerting the immune system, hey, there's something foreign at your door. You get prepared for it. So you make some antibodies. And after about 10, 15 days, they say about 3 weeks, you get the second one. The second shot is saying, okay, now I have seen you before. So now I'm going to bring a massive response, and it will be overwhelming force that will destroy the virus itself when it sees it, because the virus has all those spike proteins on it. So all these antibodies against all the parts of the spike protein are just going to have a massive response that will destroy it. You won't even know you were infected with the virus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's why it's not a long time. And the other part to the time period, I always use this analogy. When COVID started, and even now, the entire globe was shut down. Everybody was sitting at home. There was just one group of people that were working day and night. Other than the nurses and physicians on the front line, there was one group of people in the background working day and night to figure out how to stop this thing. And those were the scientists, right? So if you have, imagine what it would take if you had all the architects and all the builders, and you building a house, and you have all the plumbers with all the resources of the world. How long you think it would take them to build your house?
Oh, that's good right there. That is good right there.
I like it.
That's it right there. Never underestimate the power of money and unlimited resources.
Yeah.
And pharma does have that. Pharma and does have that. I think that was a great breakdown of the science behind the vaccine. I think that's going to be extremely helpful to our viewers, because there are a lot of rumors like floating around about the vaccine and what it does to the body. And I think that it's important that the vaccine just manipulates a natural process that happens inside of our bodies on a day-to-day basis. Like, one of the myths that I heard most recently is that the vaccine will alter your DNA. And so, yes. And so, there are people that don't want to take the vaccine because they're afraid that it's going to change their DNA and ultimately change who they are as a person. And it's like, no, no, no. That's not how this works. This is a very natural process, although the approach to vaccines is, it's a new approach to making vaccines. It's not new science. The science has been the same for years, and it's very sound. And mRNA does not go into the nucleus, and that is where your DNA lives, people.
Right. Exactly.
There's no altering. There's no altering of the DNA.
And one thing each of us will understand, and each of us sitting here will remember the end of our first year at Nihal.
Yes.
That biotechnology course that summer.
Yes.
Hell.
How could we forget?
Where we could actually see and manipulate DNA and mRNA and RNA. That is what this was all about. This was that. It was intense. It was from early in the morning to late at night, while our companions were sleeping. We were toiling upwards through the night, like Henry Wadsworth Longfellow said. So that was that course, to manipulate the DNA and the RNA. And you were right, Myla, it does not get anywhere near our nucleus. Our DNA is separated and it's in the nucleus, and that mRNA is in the cytoplasm, but it gets nowhere near the nucleus.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's also pretty quickly destroyed. It's all pretty quickly broken down. So it doesn't even have time to, once that spike protein is made, that RNA is degraded and broken
Right.
down. So there's no way for it to have any alterations on your genetic profile. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
So each of us, we all kind of branched out and have our different avenues and fortes and our end, where we are right now in life, but we all started at the same place. So for those of us and for new graduates trying to get into science and trying to do maybe vaccine development, maybe industry, maybe teaching, maybe validation, or maybe even healthcare, what do you say to them and on how to get into this type of arena, so that they can combat what we all know as health disparities, meaning there are certain populations, based off of the conversation that we had earlier, Tuskegee experiment, Nuremberg trials, and all of those things, as to why certain populations are not prevalent in studies, are not, don't have as many subjects that are enrolled in those types of studies. So what do you tell them, how to fight the good fight, right? We want to be on the front lines too. We want to be and have a seat at the table and have a say, and give our communities some sort of security in that we are out there, for us and doing the science, and it's being done by us. And so what do you say to them on how to get, kind of maybe where you are or where one of us are?
So, I look at kids from a very young age. I go to, I volunteer every year to go to the high schools to judge their science fairs and try to encourage them. I'm getting ready to start a STEM program with using the federal government and scientists in the government, because at some point we have to think about succession planning. We're not going to be doing this forever. So the young kids growing up, they are inquisitive and they have resources that we were not privy to. These people are walking around with libraries in their hands.
Absolutely.
Oh,
they have, they can Google anything and go straight to PubMed. So what I would encourage them to do is this. If you're interested in science, you're inquisitive, you want to know how life works, you're the type of person who breaks down an engine because you want to see what's inside of it, do it. And a lot of us are there. We are wide open, and we will volunteer our time to mentor you for free. The only thing we can take with us when we leave this earth is our knowledge. All the material things on earth doesn't matter. We can only take that knowledge. And most of us don't want to take it. We want to give it back to you.
Yeah.
So we'll encourage them to think and think big. Now, there are 5 of us sitting here talking about science. And a fact that is very crystal clear, probably 1.2% of people on this earth will ever get a PhD. Of that, you have Caucasians and Indians and Asians and Chinese. So what percentage of that you think is Black? It is very, very, very rare to see a Black PhD. Even if we have one, and we know because we went to school with others and we go to conferences and we meet some, but it is very, very rare. That is the true 0.01% on earth. And sometimes we don't, because we don't think ourselves too big. We're very humble, knowing the way where we came from. but it's not an ordinary thing. And so when we talk to people and we try to encourage them to climb, it is a steep hill. Many of you know it is a very hard, and Mihari, the HBCUs, they do not make it easy for you on purpose, because they know that when you go out there in this world, whichever field you end up in, you have to prove 10 times more than others that you know what you're talking about. So they push you even harder because you're representing that school. You know, we are, and the school's motto is to serve the underserved.
Right.
Yep.
We are always, so we go into the communities, and I would encourage all these kids, get my number, get my name, go to me, send me
You
an
giving out your
email,
number
and
now?
I'm glad to do it. I'm never too busy.
But you know what? I think to that point, it's just about being intentional and to push and pull, push and pull. Like you mentioned that the hill is very steep, but it's somebody behind you pushing you there. And as you pushing, you pull the next one up. Like, hey,
Yes.
you know what? And you intentionally think about, you know, what was hard for you and make it easy for the next person. Like, listen, I'm not sure if you know this, but I want to share, you know, this was my route. You know, what are you interested in? And I think it's so important to be intentional.
Yes.
I think I'm right there with you, Shantae. And listen, we are out here fighting a good fight every day,
Yeah.
making
Doing good trouble.
Good choice.
getting into good trouble and advocating for more of us to come with us.
Yes.
And so we need you guys. If you have interest in science, do contact us on the page. You know, we're willing, we're here, and we're open, because everybody on this podcast knows that I'm all about bringing folks with me. Okay, bringing folks with me and bringing your authentic self. There is no expectation for you to be perfect. The only expectation is for you to be intellectually curious and have motivation and drive. That's it.
And voila.
And keep putting one foot in front of the other. Keep moving. Got to keep moving forward.
Gotta keep moving.
Yep.
Well, listen, Jason, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It has really been a pleasure and a delight to have you on this podcast. We would love to have you back on another episode, because, you know, we just appreciate you so much and your willingness to share your knowledge with the Black community. This is what it's all about, making the data simple so that people can be informed and make good decisions about their healthcare benefits. So, folks, thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of the Black Scientists Cooperative Podcast. We hope that you'll tune in to episode 3 and find out, what are your rights? Can your employer make you take the vaccine? We're going to talk all about those points on our next podcast. So see you later, guys. Thanks for joining.